Hey everybody, Garrick Rummel here with D2T. I wanted to make a podcast or a video every Sunday about my current faith journey. I recently told God that if He helps me with duty to train, that I would be an advocate for Him and His church. And the reason I did that is because, frankly, I feel like I'm getting a lot of help. And I know that sounds crazy, and if you know me personally, that sounds really crazy because a year ago I was not religious at all. Not in the slightest. I've never really been atheist because that never really has made sense to me. But I was not religious in any way whatsoever. I did not want to go to church. And then my brother died. I got a bunch of signs from God. And I always asked him, like, I have lots of people in my family. I was raised Catholic. I come from like an Irish family, Irish background on both sides of the family. I'm like super Irish. And so I have lots of Catholics in my family. And every single one of them has always told me, like, oh, you just don't get it. Like eventually you'll, open up and Holy Spirit will get into you and then you'll be all happy and you'll get it. And I was just like, that's not going to happen. There's no chance. I've thought about this, like, and it wasn't that I was closed off. It's just like, I've thought this through. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm telling you, it's not like, I would have these conversations with people and I could always just kind of finagle my way out of the argument. And it wasn't like everybody always seems so happy when they're religious, right? Everyone's always like, oh, it's so great. I get to go see, like, my grandpa after he's, like, he's going to be in heaven and he's in a better place. Like, that's a great way to think. I lost my dad when I was 11. He committed suicide. And for a long, long time, I didn't think I would ever see him again. And to me, that was honestly okay. But when religious people, would say, like, oh, you just don't get it. It's like, do you think I don't want to get it? Like, do you think that I would rather not see my dad? Like, I would love to believe what you believe, but it just doesn't make sense to me. That's the reason I don't believe it. For me, I was never like cold towards the church. I was kind of cold towards the Catholic Church. I still have big issues with the Catholic Church. I'll get into that in a minute. But I wasn't like cold towards religion in general. It just didn't make sense. And I was like, I can't believe in something that doesn't make sense to me. And that's really just who I am to my core. I don't believe in things that don't make sense. I don't follow rules that don't make sense. I don't like dumb laws. I don't like dumb rules. For example, in the Marine Corps, I was in Afghanistan and I had this gunny who wouldn't let us wear warming layers. My family sent me some Carhartt warming layers that were gray and black. And we were sitting in Camp Leatherneck on one of the gates that went from like one of the other. There was Jordanians were working with us, but they kind of like lived in this other compound, and then there were like other people over there. I don't know. We were working this gate, and it was like the middle of the night. It was like 2 a.m. in Afghanistan, right? It was like super cold. If you didn't know, it gets super cold in Afghanistan. And he like comes up to me and he's like, why is your shirt gray and black? And I was like, because this is what my mom sent me, and he's like, you can't wear that. And I was like, okay. And so the next night I wore it, right? Obviously, because that's a stupid rule. And he comes up to me and like gives me a hard time. I'm like, Gunny, it's like 30 degrees out. We're sitting in the middle of Afghanistan at 2 a.m. in the morning. Like, why can't I wear a gray undershirt? He's like, because that's not uniform regulation. I'm like, yeah, but we're in Afghanistan and it's 2 a.m. and I'm freezing my balls off, Gunny. Like, what are you talking about? And so that's like, I don't know, that's like a goofy story. But like that's the type of thing that drove me insane in the Marine Corps. Like, oh, you can't keep your hands in your pockets, And then you'd have like these drill instructor, staff sergeants and gunnies or whatever who came out of the drill field and they're back in the fleet, and so they used to be drill instructors. Now they're like they left the drill field, and so they're just kind of like back as like regular Marines. And it's hard for them to kind of forget like all like the hard, super, I don't know, intense like regulations. And even people who weren't drill instructors would do this, but you put your hands in your pockets because you're like, I don't know, maybe you're cold, and so you put your hands in your pockets. And like if it wasn't cold, like I really wouldn't have like a hard time with it. Like, okay, whatever. It's still a dumb rule, but whatever. But like when you're literally freezing and then you're putting your hands in your pockets because you're super cold, and you're like, oh my gosh, and someone comes up to you and you're like, get your hands out of your pockets, devil dog, and you're like, but my freaking hands are cold. stupid rules. I don't like dumb rules, and I don't follow them. And I would just break them all the time. Like, I'm not like I'd take my hands out of my pockets and then leave, and I'd stick them right back in. I'm like, that's a stupid rule. I'm not going to follow it. So my point in telling these stories is that, I will never follow something if it doesn't make sense to me. I just won't. It's just like who I am in my bones. I hate authority. I hate authority that kind of trips on their own authority. That I really don't like. But when it came to religion, I was always open to the idea. It just didn't make sense to me, and I'm not going to follow something that doesn't make sense. And so whenever people would tell me like, "Oh, you just don't get it," I'm like, "Dude, I want to believe. I want to believe what you believe, but I just doesn't make sense to me." And so I always told God, I wouldn't like pray all the time because I wasn't religious and I didn't believe in it, so I didn't really see the point. But, say I had a conversation like that, there were many times afterwards, maybe I was like going to sleep that night and I would just think to myself real quickly, like, God, if you want me on your side, dude, I'm down to be on your side, but you need to give me like some 2x4s. And I would say that a lot. Again, not a lot, but like every time I would talk to him, I would, which was rare, but like every time I would say, I need a 2x4. I don't need like some small little signs. Like, if I'm thick, I'm stubborn, and you made me that way. You made me this way, so don't get upset with me for being stubborn. Like, you're the one that made me. Like, you knew when you made me that this was going to be the result. Because apparently that's what everybody says. If you made me and now I'm stubborn and I don't like following dumb stuff that I don't believe in, and you're not giving me the signs to believe, like, it needs to make sense to me. I'm not asking for something that's, and I don't need you to like give me like a straight up miracle. I just need some solid signs. That's all I was asking. I wasn't like, oh, I need Jesus to come down in heavenly form and then touch me on the head and be like, go to church, Garrick. And then I'd be like, okay, Jesus. That's not what I was asking. I was like, I just need some solid signs. And after my brother died, I got him. And the first one that I got, which I didn't even realize it at the time, was my brother and I went out to Minnesota to hang out with my family a month before my brother died. And we went out to my parents' cabin. They have a sauna at their cabin. And Phelan and I were sitting in there, and he was talking about how he had recently started going to church, and he'd found this men's group, and they weren't a bunch of dweebs. Which I remember chuckling at, because he was basically just saying he was surprised they were just a bunch of normal dudes. And he'd actually really enjoyed talking to these guys. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. And whenever I talked to Phelan, I was always open to his ideas, because I knew when I was talking to him that we would always have honest conversations. We were never trying to play gotcha games. And so I always respected my brother's opinion a lot, and I would listen to him like full out, like full stop. I never went into an argument and I was like, I'm going to try to bait him or whatever, because he never did that with me. We had a very open, very cool relationship like that. And so when he said that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then he died a month later, and it took me about a week or two to realize it, but that was the first sign I got. That was the first 2x4, was that my brother, whose opinion I highly respected, he was very well thought out. My dad was a lawyer. My brother had his kind of brain when it came to like arguing. He was very matter of fact. He wasn't emotional. He was just very well thought out, like my father was, because he was a lawyer. That was my first sign. That's the reason that I respected my brother's opinion so much, was because he was really well thought out. He was very non-emotional, and just kind of did things because he really believed them, but not just because he believed them, because he had really thought it out. And even if he wasn't exactly right, he had done the thought process and done the thinking to back up his reasoning. And so that was my first sign. And my second, and then I got a bunch of signs that week, and I'll go into more of those like in later videos. But all throughout, so that was in September of 2022, like the first week of September, and then went all the way until, I don't know, like April. No, we were down there for Easter, so I don't know. See, I'm a born-again Catholic. I should know this, but when's Easter? Let's look it up real quick. When was Easter April 9th. Okay. So, April 9th, we were down there for Easter. So this was April, May, June, July, 3 months ago. I know, I'm still doing math on my fingers. I'm good at pistol shooting. I'm not great at math. My wife is an accountant. I don't have to be. But I was having a conversation with my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and my wife. And I've had many conversations with my in-laws about religion. They're very Catholic, and they've always wanted me to be Catholic because I'm the one that has always been drawing my wife away from Catholicism. And she was a Catholic growing up. She went to church in college. She's always been pretty religious, and I kind of like dragged her away from it. And so my in-laws have always been trying to fight me to like get me back because I was the one kind of drawing their daughter away from the church. And so we were having this conversation in Florida, and I forget exactly what we were talking about, but I was mentioning the idea. Oh, I was mentioning the idea that when COVID happened, I was upset with the cat. I have lots of issues with the Catholic Church. First off, the raping little kids, the pedophilia, uh, and not just the pedophilia, like the literally like the raping of kids. That really, and also, and this is like frankly, it's equally upsetting to me. It was the covering it up, right? If some priest raped little kids, like that's there's gonna be bad apples everywhere. But the fact that it was so broadly covered up, like that's the part where it's like, okay, this was a systemic issue that like literally permeated the entire church. Like what was going on? And so that was really upsetting. Like, why do I want to go to the church? And then during COVID, when I believe the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are like two of the most, if not the most important political documents ever created. And during COVID, when the right to assemble and go to church was taken away, and then the Catholic Church didn't stand up and say no, like absolutely not. We're gonna have mass, and the Pope. I wished and I had hoped that the Pope would come out and say every single church, every single priest needs to go to church, and we're gonna stand up as a worldwide community and say we are going to fight for our right to, keep masses open, and if they want to charge every single one of our priests and send them all to jail, then we'll keep sending priests, which is what I had wanted them to do. And so I had big issues with the church. You could go to liquor stores, but you couldn't go to church. I took huge issue with that, even though I wasn't religious at the time. That is like a fundamental right as an American. It's not even a right that I wanted because I wasn't using it. But the fact that they didn't stand up for like their own right to assemble, like you're the Catholic Church, all the power and wealth and ability to fight back that you have, and you didn't stand up against this, like why? And so that was my point that I was making. And my father-in-law, his response was, okay, you're an American, right? And I was like, yeah, of course. I was like, yes, obviously. And he said, you're very patriotic. And I said, yeah. He knows this about me. I'm super patriotic. And he says, would you ever leave America? And I said, no. And I could see where he was going with this. And you probably already know where I'm going with this as well. And he said, but even with all the corruption and all the waste of money and all like the, just inefficiency of government, but really all of the corruption of government. I mean, like whether you're on the left or the right today, both sides think the other side's totally corrupt, and every like basically 4 to 8 years, the other side gets in. So half the time we're run by corrupt politicians, whether or not you're on the right or the left. Like you believe that half the time we're basically run by these corrupt dudes, and frankly, I believe that we're run by corrupt dudes 100% of the time. And he's like, okay, but even though you believe that we're run by a hugely corrupt government, you're still not going to leave America. And I was like, no. And he's like, that's what I believe with the Catholic Church. He's like, it's the true, most honest religion out there. It's the only religion. He's like, even though, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution can be warped and changed over time to be something that it wasn't intended to be, in the same way, the Catholic Church and its teachings can be warped by human beings over time. But that doesn't mean that that's what the church is, just as that doesn't mean that's what America is. And for me, that was the first time that anyone had ever explained the corruption in the church in a way that made sense to me. And I had never heard anyone explain it to me in a way that I was like, when you compare, I would never leave America to this is why you never leave the church. That was the argument I couldn't argue out of. I could always finagle my way out of an argument, but that was the one I couldn't. I was like, you got me there. Touche. And then the other part, so I stayed up like 3 hours that night, and late that night, I looked over at my wife and I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be Catholic because I know I can't argue out of that. And I knew that night I was going to be Catholic. I was like, ugh, and it kind of annoyed me because I was like, ugh. I also knew that I would have to go to confession, which I'm no perfect angel. I had a bunch of things I didn't want to say to a priest. But I have to say, in all honesty, I said every single thing. My soul is pure as driven snow. And if I die right now, I'm going straight to the big guy. Probably still have to answer for some stuff. But, yeah, my soul is clean right now. Like, pew, like a baby sheep. And 6 months ago, it was not. But yeah, I don't know. One of the reasons I want to make like these like videos though is because I feel like one of the big problems with religion nowadays is like no one's cool. No one's cool. Like I'm kind of a cool dude, I like to think. But a lot of religious people are, at least in the Catholic Church, you go to non-denominational churches, you'll meet a lot of cool people. But when it comes to the Catholic Church, you walk in these Catholic churches and it's like you're walking into a graveyard. And I'm not trying to be mean, it's just the way it is. Like you walk into a Catholic church and it's like, oh my gosh. Like you feel like you're on death's door. And that's not drawing anybody into the church, but there's good reasons to be Catholic, I think. And so to kind of sum all of this up, well, actually, I have one more point and then I'll sum it up. But the other reason I didn't want to go to the Catholic Church is because we have two kids, and I have always found an issue with church being so boring. And I never really liked going to church as a kid. So I told my wife, I was like, okay, but if you want to, our kids to be raised Catholic, like look at all of the people who aren't Catholic. Like no one's Catholic. No young people are Catholic today, right? Why is that? And I was like, whether or not the Catholic Church is the true church, do you want our kids to actually go to church? Because if you do, then we should probably bring them to a church that they actually enjoy going to. And she showed me this video, and it was of a priest explaining that it's literally called practicing your faith. And just like practicing the piano, just like practicing lacrosse, just like practicing pistol training, right? Just like dry firing, it's not always fun. It's not always going to be this super high all the time, right? There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. There's going to be good masses, there's going to be bad masses. There's going to be good priests and there's going to be bad priests, right? It's the exact same thing as anything else in life. And to think that church is going to be this amazing thing all the time, you're always going to have fun with, just isn't realistic. And for me, that was like kind of the other hurdle that I needed to get over. And so that was like another sign for me. And so to wrap this all up, the reason that I told God recently that if he helped me with duty to train, I would help be an advocate for him and his church is because I do think, and this is the weird part, but the reason that I think that he's really helping me with duty to train is because I feel like if I make this successful, I can impact millions of people's lives. And if I'm able to kind of push out a message about Catholicism that's cool, then people might be like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, like I really do like America, right? And I think religion is kind of on the cusp of making a resurgence. I think a lot of people are lost. I'm not planning on getting like too into like politics and stuff like that, but I think this whole like be who you want to be and everything's fine and like have sex with whoever you want, it's not making anybody happy. Nobody's happy right now, or a lot of young people, right? If you look at young people, I mean, suicide rates among young people are the highest they've ever been. I think young people are like just desperately seeking truth. And right now they're being told you can be whoever you want to be and whatever you want to do with your life is perfectly fine. If you want to like have a bunch of sexual partners, if you want to do all this crazy stuff, you want to try a bunch of drugs, if you want to like be a different gender, like you can just be a totally different person. And it's like, that's not true. It's just not true. I'm not going to like get like super into that. But when it comes to like religion, that's, and it just science, that's just not true. And I think people are desperately seeking truth. And when it comes to truth, like it has to be grounded in something because the problem with morality, and this is like another thing, and this is, I just can't make these videos short. I don't know. Maybe nobody's listening. I don't care. The problem with morality, if it's not grounded in religion, what's it grounded in? Nothing, right? So the next politician who comes along, then they're just going to be able to change the rules about what morality is, right? This is the crazy one, but I have no problem talking about this because I have already come out and said that we are going to, as a company with duty to train, give 5% of our profits, not even profits, like just straight up cash, every dollar that comes into our company will go straight to Operation Underground Railroad, which helps trafficked children get out of like sex slavery, basically. And I don't know if you know this, but this is another crazy one. Have you ever heard of like in the like LGBT community? There's and this hasn't become like super widespread, but you think about like where that movement started and where it is today. I've heard this quite a bit. Like MAP, minor attracted person. Like that is the type of thing because they say that pedophile has a negative connotation and that it's not someone's fault if they're attracted to minors, and we shouldn't stigmatize it, right? It's like the act that's bad, but being attracted to kids isn't bad. It's like, nope, nope, just it's wrong 100%. You're a pedophile. If you're attracted to kids, you're a pedophile. Um, and if you never act, I don't even know. I don't know a whole lot about that. I just know that we don't call you minor attracted person. We call you a pedophile. And that's just the type of like that's the type of thing that if we don't ground truth in something, then it's open to anything. And when you ground truth in like Christian doctrine and teachings, then it's actually grounded in something, and someone can't just come along and then say, "Hey, you can just have sex with as many people as you want." Who says you can't? Oh, maybe like 2,000 years of Christian doctrine and like Western society and morality. Like maybe that's a good place to start, right? Maybe like the nuclear family model that's literally been around for thousands of years. Maybe that's a good place to start. So I think that young people, this is like, I don't know, that's a little bit of a rant session there, but young people are like seeking truth right now. And the problem with like the Catholic Church is just like no one's interesting, nobody's fun. And so when I told God that if He helps me with the Catholic or with Duty to Train, I would help spread His message about His church and Him, I think I'm uniquely positioned to spread that message to young people in a way that they understand, because a year ago I was completely on the other like side. And I think I have a very unique story and I have very unique examples because I have very specific reasons of why I believe. I wasn't just someone who's like, "Oh, I just believe." I have specific reasons, and if you want to argue with me, like, go ahead and argue with me. But I have seen what has happened in my life, and I'm not, you know, I'm like open to being wrong about religion too, but like every single time, this is why I honestly think that God's helping me out, is like every single time that I have an issue, I'm like, God, I really need a sign. And then it just works out, you know? Weird. It's weird. And so I think religion is going to be making like a big resurgence soon. And so I also, you know, not that like I want to like be, I don't know, like a big religious guy, but I would love to like talk to young people about religion and explain to them that there is truth in being a good moral person, and being honest and telling the truth and living your life with moral virtues and stuff like that. Like, look, like we're not doing that now as a society, and look what it's getting us. Like, you think if we keep going down this road of immorality and just craziness and just do whatever you want type of mentality, that's just going to make us happier? Like, we've been trying that for 60 years and we keep pushing that line further and further, and it does not seem to be making us happier. So I just feel like, just as everything happens in history, it's just a big old pendulum, swings back and forth, and I feel like we're right up here, and it's going to start swinging back the other way, and then after another 80 years, it's going to swing back the other way. We're going to be right back to where we are now. But I just feel like we're on the cusp of kids being like, okay, listen, this is not correct. This is not true. And they're going to be searching for the truth. And I feel like people like myself, and here's another thing. I know a lot of younger people who are starting to go back to church now, and it's kind of weird. I'm like, I've seen a lot of people in my own life who I'm like, oh, I just ask people now. I used to feel uncomfortable asking people if they were religious, and in the past couple of months, I've asked quite a few people, and I've been surprised by how many people say like, yeah, I'm religious. And I was like, oh, that's actually surprising. I didn't know that. So anyway, this is like, yeah, super long, but I got a bunch of signs. I told God that I would be an advocate for him and his church. Um, just like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution can be warped and, you know, screwed up over time, so can the Catholic Church. And it is totally broken right now. But I think America is the same way. But that doesn't mean you stop fighting for it. If I don't fight for America, who will? And if I don't fight for the Catholic Church, then who will? Right? If we don't fight for America, then it falls. And then we're in deep, 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 deep trouble. Right? If we don't fight for the Catholic Church and it falls, I do believe we're in deep, 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 deep trouble. I don't believe, frankly, as strongly in the Catholic Church as I do in America. I kind of feel bad saying that. I kind of feel bad, but that's just because like I've always believed in America, and I only just became Catholic 2 months ago. But I think over time that will eventually switch because anyone that I talk to who's Catholic, they say like it's the most important part of their life, and for me, I feel like that will eventually become true. But I don't want to be dishonest when I'm doing these videos. But I do feel like they're very similar in that way that each can be corrupted by men, and they have been. That does not make the institution itself bad. Also, practicing your faith. Church can be boring. Sometimes the music isn't great. Sometimes the homilies suck. But practice makes perfect. And the more you go, find different churches, really seek out like the right church for you, be a part of the community. Don't just try to take, try to give back. And I think that these types of messages will resonate with younger people. And yeah, I'm going to start creating more like outlines so I don't ramble as much on these videos. But yeah, until next Sunday, stay safe, live free. And actually, I talked to somebody recently, and so I'll sign off with this on these Sunday videos. Stay safe, live free, and keep the faith. I'll talk to you later. See ya.